The Montreal Canadiens have lost their fourth straight game, and with their playoff chances on the brink, it is time for a closed-door meeting today on Locked On Canadiens.
You're Locked On Canadiens, your daily podcast on the Montreal Canadiens, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome into episode 1276 of Locked On Canadiens. Thank you so much for making us your first listen of the day and for subscribing wherever you get your podcast. Doing that supports the show and ensures you do not miss an episode. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, FanDuel customers can get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. We thank you once again for joining us here on Locked On Canadiens, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Ian Boisvert, also known as that Maybe It's Ian, and I'm not joined by Laura Saba, who I hope is doing what the Canadiens did for the first period and is sleeping because she didn't miss much of a game. Laura, if this is your first time hearing about it, the Canadiens lost 6-4 against the Philadelphia Flyers in a game that we sort of looked at coming into it as a game the Canadiens not only should win, but must win. The Flyers are not good. They just fired their coach, and instead they put up an absolute stinker of a game, and all of a sudden their chances of making the playoffs in that final wild card spot have gone from, a little over 50%, and I would imagine they're dipping now with other games to come. The Rangers are out on the West Coast finishing up a game against Colorado as I record this. We don't know what the Islanders will do on Thursday, or on Friday rather. Friday. That's when they play next. We've got a lot to cover on today's show. We're going to talk about that game. This is not going to be a kind recording to the Montreal Canadiens because I don't believe most of them deserve it. And then we have our mailbag. We have a lot of questions, a lot of interest in Oliver Kapanen as we're watching him over in Europe play very meaningful minutes in a playoff series. So we'll take a look at him and where he fits into this lineup. Talk about the battle of the rookies that we got to see against Philadelphia and wonder, if you got your pick of the three, which one would you take? But first, we have to start with that game in Philadelphia. It's long, if everyday listeners of the show will know that we have a theory about Mike Matheson on this show, and this isn't going to be a Matheson rant. He deserves it later, and he'll get it. But we have a theory about Matheson where you can tell from the first couple shifts what kind of game he's going to have. And I fear that has leaked to the rest of this team in the sense that it felt like they were going to lose this game from like the first 3 or 4 minutes of the game. It just didn't seem like they were in it at all. Down, they gave up 3 in the first period to Philly. They did the thing that they did against St. Louis where they gave one up, they got it right back, and then just completely fell apart after that. I saw a lot of folks blaming Jakub Dobeš, who got the start in this game over Sam Montembeault, for the way that this game unfolded. I find that in a game like this, where everybody in front of him was horrific, it's impossible to blame the goaltender for how this game turned out. Let's break down a couple of the goals. The first goal, Struble and Carrier go behind the net. They're not communicating. Waugh doesn't pick up Mitchkov in the slot. The puck goes from below the net to the middle of the slot to in the net. The second goal, very similar. Nicolas Deslauriers, former Montreal Canadiens, scores his first goal of the year on a similar play. Xhekaj is behind the net covering a guy that has the puck. Savard is trying to make a decision whether or not he wants to go and make that an advantage for the Canadiens by getting on that attack. That's part of their hybrid system, right? Is they like to outman you in situations where they think they can. But Savard in that instance wasn't sure, should I go to that guy? Should I cover the front of the net? He gets stuck in between doing neither of those things. And the same thing happens. It goes from behind the net to right in front of the net. Dobeš had no chance at it. That's 2 goals that looked eerily similar to one another because they were not communicating with each other. They were not telling each other where they were going to be. And Savard, even as a veteran, showed that he is very unsure of where he's supposed to be right now, which can't be the case if you're David Savard. It just can't. And that just set up the night for the Montreal Canadiens. I think communication was one of the big issues. I think that it comes down to that. there were other instances where the third line, I saw a few times where the puck was sitting in between two or three of them, and all of them just kind of looked at it thinking somebody else was going to get it. No one is taking charge on this team. Nobody is deciding, that's my puck, I want to do it, except for Lane Hutson, who for periods of this game looked like he was going to try to do it himself. And he nearly did. So we'll use this as a chance to hit on our Lane Hutson update. He scores 2 points in this one. He was the offensive engine for the Canadiens. That makes him 9 points away from passing Chelios in the remaining, I believe, what was that game? I think there's 11 games left. So he's within range. Like he's right on pace for what we hope he's going to do. He also has 50 assists now. He's only the 5th defenseman in NHL history to have 50 assists as a rookie. I can't help but think that maybe that's getting lost in the fact that the Canadiens are playing really bad hockey right now. They're just not playing well. But Hutson just did something that only 5 other people have done before. One of them being Chris Chelios, who he's still trying to chase down. I believe the record for assists is 60. I think it's Larry Murphy that has it, and that's within range for Hutson. Honestly, I mean, he needs 9 more points. You got to figure most of those are going to be assists. If he has like a couple games where he really just can't stop handing the puck over to his teammates, there's going to be a real chance for him to hit that. Cole Caulfield scores as well, 34th. He's now 6 away from a 40-goal season, which is nice. He's looked snake bitten though. The whole first line has looked like they don't have any confidence right now. Nick Suzuki had a tap in that he just kind of pushed a little too far back towards the middle of the net, and Samuel Ersson was able to get his pad on it. And like his body language was like stuff that you just don't see from Nick Suzuki. He looked legitimately frustrated. The other aspect of this game, I said communication. They were not communicating out there. That building was silent. You could hear everything that was happening. The second thing that I think really hurt them in this game was the fact that they could not hit the net. I would like to say there was about a dozen chances that they had to put the puck on net in a really dangerous situation, and it found the end boards or the glass. And then, there was one crossbar in the second period. But other than that, it was just, I hope the fans behind the net had earplugs in, because the puck was just rattling off the glass all night. That just can't happen when you're already having this much of a hard time. And it can't happen against a goalie like Samuel Ersson, who isn't good. Like I talk about it in our weekly forecast. He's like an 870 goalie. You don't need to put it in off the bar to score on him. You might put it through him if you just hit him in the chest with it. Like I genuinely didn't understand that strategy from the Montreal Canadiens. And finally, the thing that I think sunk them was mistakes. They made so many mistakes. I'm going to bring up our magic mic meter here, because that was a negative 15 on the mic meter. That was one of the most tragic mics we've had in a long time. He gifted Matvei Michkov not only 1 but 2 breakaways in this game just by making really bad choices with the puck at the blue line. The Flyers had not scored on a power play at all in the month of March. As I'm recording this, it's March 27th. So that's not good. They're the 30th ranked power play in the league. And they give up a power play goal because the Canadiens were chasing the game. They had to try to score shorthanded. They get a good 2-on-1 rush. Matheson takes a shot. This play isn't on him. He makes a good shot. It goes in and out of the glove of Ersson. Army is behind the net, and he tries to throw it back through the slot to Jake Evans, and the puck misses him, and the Flyers get a break the other way. There are so many things in this game where the Canadiens, they hurt themselves consistently. And against a team like the Flyers, who just fired their coach for essentially saying, I don't want to coach this team anymore. They wanted it more, and they just wanted way more than they wanted this more than the Canadiens did. And the one thing I want to talk about in our second segment here is whether or not the intensity can be found again for the Montreal Canadiens. It's something that they had a really hard time, finding again when they were struggling. And I don't know whether or not it's going to be possible to get that back. And we'll talk about that coming up next. March Madness is here. And FanDuel is giving you the chance to get in on the action like never before. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's 200 extra bucks to use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories and even who's cutting down the nets. If you've got your eye on a few underdogs this year, FanDuel makes it easier to back them with spreads, totals, and game props. With tournament games happening almost every day, there's always something exciting to bet on. And if you miss opening tip-off, you can get in on some live bets as you watch the action unfold. The FanDuel app is simple to use, and when I win, I get paid instantly. No more waiting around. So visit FanDuel.com and get in on the college hoops action all tournament long.
As you know, I am currently abroad, but the first thing I'm doing as soon as I set foot back in Montreal is putting in my next order at Farm to Fork. If you, like me, are a fan of premium, quality, locally grown meats delivered straight to your door, Farm to Fork makes it easy for you to get premium steaks, air-chilled chicken, wild-caught seafood, and more. And all the meats are locally raised, so when you order, you are supporting a local producer, especially right now as it's time to buy Canadian. They're delivering all across Ontario and Western Quebec, and the best part is delivery is free with a minimum order of $199. You don't even need to leave the house to get this kind of quality. And let me tell you, those steaks are something else. Tender, juicy, perfectly cooked. That air-chilled chicken for me has been a staple, especially as I try to up my protein. It's so much more flavorful than what I would find at the store. And that wild-caught seafood is a game changer. Delicious, fresh, clean, so flavorful, so delicious. And right now I have a promo code for you. Use code LOCKEDON40 at farm2forkdelivery.ca for $40 off your first order. The code is LOCKEDON40 at farm2forkdelivery.ca for $40 off your first order.
All right, we are back. And we're going to get into our mailbag a little later in this segment, but I wanted to sort of visit the idea that this team they seem a step behind. They seem like they are not, they're just not playing to the same level of intensity. And look, they might be tired. I know that that's a common refrain when we watch teams like this, go deep into the season, especially a team like this where, the Canadiens don't have extras. They don't have guys to just come in and play a few games and allow guys to sit, lower in the lineup. Just keep those guys fresh. They're operating at their bare minimum right now. I'm sure everybody took a deep breath when they saw Brendan Gallagher go down towards I believe the end of the second period, and he left the bench for a while. He did start the next period, so thankfully, they're not going to lose him. At least it doesn't seem like it. But look, they're going into another game as you're listening to this today. They're on the way to Raleigh as I'm recording it to play the Carolina Hurricanes, a much better team who, if you lack the intensity that you need and the intensity you could not find against the Philadelphia Flyers, they're going to run you out of that building. And again, I don't mean to, I'm not going to blame the fourth line. I think they've been bad. Don't get me wrong. I think that there's something there it's Armia's injury, but that shouldn't have toppled the whole experience. They are the I don't think they're the catalyst for this team, but they are a symbol for when they're playing their game at the level that they want to. Marty just keeps saying, they keep asking him, how are you guys going to get out of this? He keeps saying it's not a fun answer, but we're just going to play our game. The fourth line not being good does not allow them to play their game. And I thought it was extremely telling that in this game against the Flyers, he started the third line. He did not start the fourth line. It's something that he does all the time. He loves to roll that fourth line out to let them set the tone and get the game going. But it just doesn't, he can't trust them to do that right now. He's not getting any energy out of that line. So it's frustrating to watch. Look, if they can't find it in Philadelphia, they're going into the second half of a back-to-back against a, perennial Stanley Cup contender in Carolina. I don't know how you're going to find it, but you better find it because they've used up a lot of their cushion that they have on the rest of the conference. They need to start picking up points again. This is their fourth loss in a row. They have 2 wins in their last 7 games. It's kind of astounding they're even in the race at this point. But, the thing is they can find it again. I believe that this group can find it again. They all are just, I think they're gripping their sticks a little too tight. They're firing every puck off the glass. Like, just put the puck on net, try to crash for a rebound. That's how you scored against Ottawa. I remember the Nick Suzuki goal on the second power play wave. He just crashed the net, and they dug out a rebound and put it in. If the skill isn't going, you have to work hard. And I'm not saying they're not, they're disinterested or whatever, but they're having a hard time finding that killer instinct that we talk about a lot on this show. So hopefully they can find that on Friday against the Carolina Hurricanes, and we can come back on Monday and talk about not only 1 but 2 wins as they go in and play Florida on Sunday afternoon. All right, let's jump into our mailbag. I want to start with a question from Mouse of the West, since we're talking about losing and potentially tanking. Mouse of the West asks, counterfactual, assume Montreal tanked this year and will draft 5th. Name which player we will pick. Reason, we name a player now, and when the 5th place pick would not push us over the top to win a cup, we don't have to have regrets. I love this question because it is pre-arguing, which I as somebody who has to, puts out 30 minutes of my somewhat unfiltered thoughts, I have to constantly be thinking about, well, what is this person going to argue against what I'm about to say, and how can I counter it before they have the opportunity to do that? So this Mouse of the West is right up that category. Like how can we choose a guy now that's going to get picked 5th, so we go, it's not a big deal, they didn't pick him. I'm looking at some mock drafts, and it looks like Matthew Schaefer has sort of stepped up his game. Michael Misa is a name that we've heard for a long time. James Higgins is one that seems like might be sliding. I think that's partially due to his size. He's not quite 6 feet. James Higgins would be the one that, might end up going in the 4th or 5th range, which is right where the Flyers are set to pick, as is Buffalo and Pittsburgh. They're all sort of digging around there with Seattle. So those are some fun options for guys that we will get upset about not having. And then if this team never does anything and that player never amounts to anything, we can go, water under the bridge. It doesn't really matter. Bouncing to another question from a Locked On host. It started with Laura asking, essentially, why is Mike Matheson to blame for all the problems in the world? And she meant to type, why does he hurt puppies? But she meant she wrote puppets. So Jay Forrester of Locked On Blue Jackets asked, bouncing off of this to ask, which is the funniest Habs player to be the only human on an all Muppet team? I will share Scott Matla's response because he jumped right in there. It's Armia or Dvorak, who look like they've never had fun once in their lives. That's a terrific answer. I kind of like the idea of it being Brendan Gallagher, just being like a crotchety old man trying to deal with, a team with like Kermit the Frog and, I'm thinking of like Scooter just doing whatever, Animal somewhere. But I also like the idea of it being Sam Montembeault, just being the goalie behind all of this and having to essentially save the day with a team of Muppets in front of you. I find that to be very, the idea of that's very funny to me. So that's a fantastic question. I love involving the Muppets in just about anything that I can do. Let's see what else we got here. This one from Nathaniel Hers asks, I see the Habs transitioning to a strong link team with the arrival of Demidov and shouldn't need to worry too much about the Dvorak situation. Personally, I'd like to see if Beck can fill that role. The next part of this question asks about Kapanen. I'm going to get to that in the third segment because there's a lot to talk about with Kapanen there. But to the point at the beginning, I kind of worry about becoming a strong link team. It's kind of tough to say that now when they don't have that kind of, game-breaking talent that can put up over 100 points and potentially, just carry the team on nights like a Nathan McKinnon type. But like if you're looking at Colorado as the example of a team that could be a strong link team, they also have an incredible supporting cast behind that player, right? And they've made a lot of moves to ensure that they have a strong cast behind that player. And it also helps that they have not one but two, legitimately strong links that could easily just lift any team to a Stanley Cup in both Nathan McKinnon and Cale Makar, who just are two of the most phenomenal players on the planet. So I don't know that we can say that the Canadiens will be that with Demidov showing up immediately, but I don't think that they'll need to be because I think there is good depth coming You look at the core that they have locked up already: Suzuki, Caulfield, Gooley, Slavkovsky. Like that's a big part of their core, and they're locked up to very reasonable deals. And when this team is competitive, those deals will allow them to add and not be a strong linked team, to be one of those deep teams like Colorado. Colorado's a bit of an anomaly in that they are a very deep team, and they also have two of the most elite players on the planet. They're like if Edmonton had depth. That's that's what Colorado is. So yeah, thanks for the question, Nathan. I really appreciate it. All right, we're going to step aside for a second. When we come back, we'll finish off the mailbag talking about Kapanen and his journeys in the European leagues and whether or not he can be the 2C for Montreal coming up, and which rookie we would pick out of the Calder race if we got our pick of any three of them. We'll get into that in just a minute. Daylight savings time snuck up on us again, and if you're feeling that lost hour of sleep, 5-Hour Energy has your back. The extra sunshine means more time for fun, but sometimes you need a little boost to power through. Whether you're staying up late watching the NCAA tournament, or squeezing in a round of golf after work, or just trying to keep up with your busy day, 5-Hour Energy gives you that quick, refreshing pick-me-up whenever you need it. I've been staying up late watching all the NHL playoff races unfold. It's kind of my job, and 5-Hour Energy helps keep me up the next day. Head to 5hourenergy.com to find over 15 flavors to choose from, including watermelon, blue raspberry, and peach mango. You can even build your own 12-pack or 24-pack, and it'll be delivered right to your door. Need one now? Grab a 5-Hour Energy shot at your local grocery or convenience store. They're everywhere. Stock up and stay energized. All right, heading into our final fourth line shift of the week. Laura, I did it. We made it through the week. We need you back, though, eventually. So I can only do this for so long. These are Pizzetta shifts. These aren't just fourth line shifts. These are like, we're putting this guy out there because we don't have another option. Speaking of that, really quick, let's talk about the Flyers for a minute, because we actually have a question in here about the Flyers. And I want to know what their plan was tonight with Cam York. I know he got burned a lot in the game against Toronto. He was the result of a lot of goals against. But it felt very cruel to just watch him sit on the bench all night and never play him. And the reason they did that was because they've burned through all of their call-ups and they don't have the rationale for an emergency call-up. So if you remember a few years ago when Jonathan Drouin was still here, they had to do that with him. He was going to be scratched for missing a practice or being late to a meeting. I think that's what it was. He was late to something. And he just sat on the bench because they didn't have an option because somebody had to sit. So it felt very much like that. Or, there was a game against Florida a few years ago where the same thing happened. They had to play somebody late in the season. They didn't want anybody to get hurt. I think that was the game Montreal just kind of walked all over the Panthers. It was very weird to watch that unfold. Jeff the Red asks, talking about the Flyers, what will John Tortorella do now? I think the funniest outcome is the Ducks move on from Greg Cronin, their head coach, and Torts walks in there to coach Cutter Gauthier anyway. I think that would be really funny. I'm always looking for the funniest outcome here. So that's where my head is at. Let's stick with Jeff the Red here. Question here. What's the craziest while still possible thing you can think could happen in the Eastern Conference playoff race? I think it's that the Devils could fall out of it. If the Rangers and Islanders really kick it into high gear, the Devils have kind of struggled as of late. They just won their last game as I'm recording this, but that's a team that's vulnerable. They have a lot of injuries. Jack Hughes isn't playing the rest of the year. Like, that's a team that you could see fall out of it. It's possible. It's not exactly super crazy either, considering the situation they're in, but they're in a divisional playoff spot by a few points right now. It would be a little astounding to watch them just completely fall out of it. Let's stick with the Devils for one more second. Charles Westcott asks, did you see how Kovacevic was taken down by his coach, Sheldon Keefe? Sheldon's true nature shines through once again. I found that to be very cold from Sheldon Keefe. For those who haven't seen it, Jonathan Kovacevic was asked after a game, essentially like, what does the team have to do? And he said that they need to find another gear. They need to start playing like it's a playoff game. And when that was relayed back to Sheldon Keefe, he essentially said, Jonathan just needs to play better. He needs to be better. And I found that to be just like really just petty from a coach who should know better, because Kovacevic wasn't saying all of these guys need to be better. He said we, including himself in that, we need to find a gear. There's never an I in any of this. There's never a you in any of this. I found that to be a really poorly timed thing. He ended up making up for it by, they asked him about Kovacevic in the middle of the game, and he like joked, he's awesome, he's playing great. He very clearly just trying to, pad that goodwill back. But it was a very weird move by a coach that I don't know that he's necessarily, earned that sort of remark from, talking about another player. All right, let's talk about Oliver Kapanen, because we had a question earlier from Nathan Hers that asked about him. I see Super Rain ask, can Oliver Kapanen take the 2C role? Yep. So those are the two questions on Oliver Kapanen. Look, he's playing over in Europe right now. He's playing for Timrå. They're in a playoff series with Frölunda. That series, they just tied at 2 games thanks to him. He is centering a top 6 line, and he had an assist on the goal that won the game for them. I think that this is sort of what we wanted them to do with Slav for a little while when he was a rookie, right? Was send him to Europe, just let him light it up over there in like genuine obscurity. It wouldn't have happened for Slav that way, because we would have all been, glued to our TVs or computers watching, his Finnish league team play out the season. But I think that this season has been really great for Kapanen. He got the joy of being able to say he made the NHL team. And then the Canadiens made the right choice by sending him over there and just letting him dominate, letting him play in a league that makes sense for him. He's got 35 points in 36 regular season games. He's got 2 points in the 4 playoff games he's played so far. As far as whether or not he can be the 2C, it won't be right away, but I wouldn't count him out. He seems to be a very intelligent player as far as hockey sense goes. I've always appreciated, when we were watching him in Montreal, that it seemed like he knew what play he needed to make, and the timing of the game just didn't allow him to make it. I think that as he gets more of those reps in North America, he'll improve in that way. So we'll see. I have high hopes for him. It's a player who was drafted with a pretty high draft pick. I believe he was a second rounder. That's a player who, if you hit on and he becomes a second line center or just a second line player, maybe they shift him to the wing. I think that's a huge win for this team. And it's a guy that I'm really excited to watch next year. He kind of won us all over in training camp. And then, once the NHL regular season started and the speed picked up and they had less space, it became obvious he shouldn't be out there doing it anymore. So there's that. Let's move on to Danny Joe 22, who asks, if you could swap Hutson for one of either Michkov or Macklin Celebrini, would you, and which one? Which one of them do you think would be the best long-term for the Montreal Canadiens? Oh, well, it's interesting because I read this question before the game, and my answer wasn't Matvei Michkov, and then he scored twice, and it's sort of like, well, you can make the argument. I think if I was going to switch Hutson for any of them, though, it would be Celebrini, just because he's a center, and that would be a great fit for this team. They don't need another guy like Michkov with, Demidov on the way, with Line A around, with, a lot of skill on the wing already. They need depth down the middle. If I was going to do it, that's what I would do. I would not do that. I think that Lane Hutson is the rarer breed of player. Like I mentioned earlier, he's got 50 assists as a defenseman as a rookie. That's only been done 5 times in National Hockey League history before. And now he's one of them. I don't think that it makes a ton of sense to, just kind of make that move for a Macklin Celebrini. It's not to say that I think Macklin Celebrini won't be as good as Hutson. I just think that player might be easier to find than a guy like Hutson, who there are very few comparables for, right? We name the same couple guys. We name, Cale Makar, Quinn Hughes, Adam Fox. Those are really the 3 guys that make sense as archetypes of player that could be the guy that we're looking at with Lane Hutson. Whereas Macklin Celebrini, yes, he's incredible. He's an elite player, but there are a lot of elite centers in this league. There are very few who can do the things that a Lane Hutson does. So I think I would stick with Lane, especially because, just getting to watch him every game is just such a treat. Played 28 minutes, by the way, 28 and a half minutes against Philadelphia. Marty was riding him because he knew he gave him the best chance to win. It's unfortunate it didn't work out, but hey, he added 2 more points. He's still chasing down that Chelios record. All right, I think we're going to leave it there. I will review our trivia question from the previous day. I don't have a trivia question today, unfortunately, but we'll add one over the weekend. But let's cover the one from Thursday's episode. Former Hab and Flyer Glenn Metropolitan was held off the score sheet in his first ever National Hockey League game. in 1999 with the Washington Capitals, but a month later, he got another shot, scoring twice and adding an assist in his second ever NHL game. This former Hab assisted on his second goal. And the answer was Sergei Gonchar, which I love that he's a former Hab. It's one of my favorite guys to remember because I think Gonchar, he's not in the Hall of Fame. He might be able to. He's kind of a compiler more than like a, could win an award in any given season. He played forever. And, he just compiled a bunch of statistics that way. But still a guy that I think, one of the most impressive, defensive careers of, the last, 30 years or so. Super Rain had the answer right on that one. So congrats to Super Rain. Also notable on that game from Glenn Metropolitan, the first point that he got was an assist on the very first goal, also assisting on that former Montreal Canadian Jan Bulish. So Montreal Canadiens had their hands all over that game and we didn't even know it. All right. That's going to do it for us today and this week on Locked On Canadiens. Thanks so much for tuning in. Every day. Also part of the Locked On Podcast Network is Locked On NHL, bringing you the daily league-wide stories that matter, local coverage you love from Locked On. Find Locked On NHL on YouTube, wherever you listen to podcasts. We're also available on Amazon Fire TV on your free TV channels app. Click the Montreal Canadiens logo in the hockey section, and you can watch all of our episodes there as well, if that's another place where you like to consume your content. We are Locked On Canadiens everywhere that we post on social media, Bluesky, Instagram, TikTok, Locked On Canadiens, and all of those places. LockedOnCanadiens@gmail.com if you want to send us questions or just tell us something about yourselves. We like to hear about our listeners. We love to hear where you guys listen to us. It's one of the nicest things about this show is folks tell me that we're part of their routine. It means a lot. So if you want to reach out to us, LockedOnCanadiens@gmail.com is the best way to do so. You can find me all over the internet at Maybe It's Ian. You can find Laura at The Active Stick. Thanks so much for tuning in this week, guys. We will see you next week.